All right, well, welcome back, everybody. I imagine with the weather, there might have been a few people, a few stragglers. I've already heard from a few students who are viewing from home today, which their long commute was interrupted by the bad weather and probably terrible traffic in various places around, I'm sure. Um, but I'm glad you're all here. I was talking about the play here just a few minutes ago, and it went really well. So thanks for your prayers and some of you who attended. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to meet you afterwards. The director of the play gives a real strict rule that we just can't go out in costume. We can't go out and meet the crowd. We have to take our costumes off and go back. And apparently on Saturday we had to stay behind because we had to strike the set and all that. So, but if you did attend, I hope that was an enjoyable experience. I heard from some of you over email, and that'll be a great little extra credit project for you. So that'll help out a lot. Just as a disclaimer for today, if I do anything strange in front of all of you or in front of the camera here, it's because I'm on Mucinex and 24-hour cold relief, daytime, 24-hour nighttime cold medicine. I picked up the cold bug that's going around, and maybe some of you have experienced it. It hits you and knocks you down. I took a 4-hour nap yesterday. It's just not like me. I normally never do that on a Sunday, Maybe I'll catch a quick cat nap, but not 4 hours. So I'm coming in you today as energetic as I can get, but if my mind is like, a little bit, I say loopy, so we'll see what happens. So that being said, I've got a couple prayer requests. I'd like to start the class with prayer. We can keep praying for our sister missionary Colleen. Her situation in North Africa changes all the time. She's taken this class, and right now she's in an area that has like dial-up speed internet. And she's taken this class. It's interesting because we're able to, with the technology, deliver her recorded lecture videos where she can basically, even with snail pace, dial-up speed, she can let her computer download the entire video and watch it offline the next day. So it's just really exciting that we can even service our missionaries that way. But we need to pray for safety for her. She's the one last semester that had to get off the grid for 2 weeks because she was in a city where the local authorities ordered all Christians to leave. Talk about interruptions, life interruptions, right? But she finished the class strong, and she's at it again this spring. So we'll pray for Colleen and her situation. Celebrate for Braden and his wife. Had a baby, I think it was just last week. So there's adjustments, life adjustments there. So we'll pray for him and his catching up with sleep deprivation and all of that. So I'm sure there's other unspoken requests, but let's just go to the Lord in prayer, and we'll get started. Lord, we do thank you for the opportunities for ministry that you give us. And so many of us are already serving in various capacities, literally around the world. It's so exciting to hear updates and see pictures of different people around who are serving. And thank you for the missionaries, for the pastors in small town, West Texas towns, and the stay-at-home moms who are investing in their children and homeschool situations and all of these different facets of ministry that we are about kingdom building work, Lord, and we don't want to lose track of that in the busyness of our day, Lord. Everything that we do is to bring glory to your name, to represent you and your reputation in this world that's still full of darkness. Lord, I thank you for the opportunity to share in this play that, Lord, in a creative way, Lord, the gospel was proclaimed. And I thank you for those kids, the fifth graders of the MISD school system who heard and were impacted with something that they'll be thinking about for some time. And pray for the opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity for sharing more specific biblical interaction with the actual members of the play on Saturday. Thank you for that, Lord. And Lord, for those who are sick, we pray for quick recovery for the different bugs that are going around. Lord, we pray for health, provision for our finances. Lord, none of us are taking this class and others in a vacuum. Lord, bless this group of students, bless their families, if they have children at home and moms and stay-at-home moms. And Lord, just guide us through this semester, Lord, and grant us joy along the journey. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Well, we're going to pick up with 2 Kings, and hopefully we'll get out of 2 Kings today. I really like to. I'm going to try to be as efficient as I can. It's just such a densely written book, combination of books, as we've seen. There's just, the author is pulling from source material, but as the inspired author is bringing us close to the heartbeat of the divided kingdom at this time in 2 Kings. Here's our deep thought picture. 2 Kings is gets us to the heart of the matter, the tragedy, and this deep thought picture. Everybody see it? Come on. You can use this with your youth, by the way, if you're ever. 2 Kings, that's obvious. 2 Kings. Exile. Oh, come on. I thought some more students would get the extra credit for today. Well, that's too bad. Opportunity lost. Exile. We're going to get to the exile. 2 Kings is going to, the author is obviously giving us a historical theological evaluation of why they're in exile. I think it's pretty clear, although there's some interesting things there. Exactly when the author's operating, I think it's safe to say generally that he is probably at least finishing his theological historical masterpiece here, probably with the exiles who are in Babylon, and kind of summarizing for them, hey, why are we here? Answering that question and getting them ready for the next thing. So he'll be working, as well as the prophet Ezekiel, who's with the exiles in Babylon. We'll hear from him next fall when we come back and take our Old Testament Survey 3, if you're with us, and I'll talk more about that then. So, let's get to the text. We have more gloom and doom to critique here in 2 Kings. Let's start with, and I'm going to call on, there you go. I have my, there we go, pictorial directory here. I'll call on a lot of you to read today. Just as a reminder, try to read, if I call on you to read text, read loudly and confidently and boldly, like I was doing at the play, So with a little pizzazz. Let's start with Benjamin Adcock. Where are you? Are you here today? Nope. How about David? Is he not here today? Wow. Okay. Trevor Ball? Are you here? Okay. Let's have you read starting in 2 Kings chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. And as you know, 2 Kings is just a continuation, really, of 1 Kings. So when you're reading it, chapter 1, verses 1 through 4.
After the death of Ahab of Moab rebelled against Israel. Now, Azariah fell through the lattice in his upper chamber in Samaria and lay sick, so he sent messengers telling them, go inquire at Zebub, the god of Ekron, whether I shall recover from the sickness. But the angel of the Lord said to Elijah the Tishbite, arise, go up to meet the messengers of the king of Samaria, and say to them, it is because there is no God in Israel that you are going to inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron. Now therefore, thus say the Lord, you shall not come down from the bed to which you have gone up, but you shall surely die. So Elijah went.
All right, so we've got this encounter with the prophets. Remember, the prophets are, God's raising up prophets like Elijah, and these prophets are having interactions with kings, a lot of bad kings in their time. In response to the message of the messengers here, Ahaziah asked about the kind of man that they encountered. And we have the response in verse 8. And they answered him, he was a hairy man with a leather girdle bound about his loins. And he said, it is Elijah the Tishbite. So here's a description of Elijah. He's a mountain man, apparently. It's just for fun. So it seems, so they respond, but it seems the Lord has another answer to the king's question. After 3 rounds, we have Elijah's confirmed, not just as a hairy man from Tishbite, but as a man of God in verse 13. So he again sent the captain of a third 50 with his 50. When the third captain of 50 went up, he came and bowed down on his knees before Elijah and begged him and said to him, "O man of God," right? "Please let my life and the lives of these 50 servants of yours be precious in your sight." So Ahaziah dies in verse 17, according to the words of the prophet Elijah. So Ahaziah died according to the word of the Lord, which Elijah had spoken. And because he had no son, Jehoram became king in his place in the 2nd year of Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. So after passing on his mantle, Elijah to Elisha, we see that Elijah is taken up to be with the Lord. And that's in the chapter 2 there in verse 11. Then it came about as they were going along and talking that, behold, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire, which separated the two of them. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind, or the idea of a windstorm or something, to heaven, which is interesting. So there you go. We have, a lot of different kinds of details that the author gives us here. One of them is really interesting. Here at the end of chapter 2, I find it interesting as Elisha is beginning his prophetic ministry. You've got the seriousness of the Lord kind of cracking through in various places. Then he went up from there to Bethel, and he was going up by the way. Young lads came out the city and mocked him and said to him, "Go up, you old bald head. Go up, you old bald head." I gave a youth message on this once. It's kind of interesting. When he looked behind him and saw them, he cursed them in the name of the Lord. Then 2 female bears came out of the woods and tore up 42 lads of their number. And he went there to Mount Carmel, and from there he returned to Samaria. It just shows you the severity of God's agenda for the day. Be careful when you're mocking the Lord, right? All right, well, let's keep going here. Elisha's ministry begins as a prophet, and we see some glimpses into. The author here gives us some, snapshots into the prophet's life. Chapter 4. Let's see, Caitlin over here. Could you read for us in chapter 4, verses 1 through 7?
1 through 7?
Yeah.
Now a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elisha, "Your servant my husband is dead, and you know that your servant feared the Lord. And the creditor has come to take my 2 children to be his slaves." And Elisha said to her, "What should I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in your house?" And she said, "My maidservant has nothing in the house except for a jar of oil." And then he said, "Go, borrow the vessels at large for yourself and from your neighbors, even empty vessels, and do not get a few. And you shall go in and shut the door behind you and your sons, and pour out into all of these vessels. And you shall set aside what is full." And so she went from him, shut the door behind her and her sons, and they were bringing the vessels to her, and she poured. And when the vessels were full, she said to her son, "Bring me another vessel." And he said to her, "There is not one vessel more." And the oil stopped. And then she came and told the man of God, and he said to her, "Go and sell the oil, pay your debt, and you and your sons can live on the rest."
We have to ask ourselves, what's the author, the author we've talked about. These are inspired authors who are allowed to be selective, so they're, bringing in details of events that have happened, and in this case, a miracle, a provision. What kinds of things would you, and if you're involved in a preaching or teaching ministry, just turn to your neighbor and maybe share what's one insight or nugget you might come or pull from this text. I mean, think about it. It's kind of odd, or is it odd? I mean, what can you say about it? So everybody, turn to your neighbor, talk about it for a second, and let's come back. Access to the class. Are they in the class? Oh, they just thought they'd try it. What's his name? Okay. All right. Welcome, Croatia. I hope you're able to see it clearly and hear it clearly without any kind of lag. That's really interesting. Let us know how it works for you, okay? Can you hear it and see it really clear? Wow, that's great. All right, well, what did you all come up with? What would be a primary or a central teaching or preaching point from this passage? Anybody? Yeah, what do you got?
God will use what you have right there on hand to do His work. It's there's no magic wand involved here.
All right, good. Anybody else?
God's a faithful provider, especially for those that are following Him.
Yeah, both of you are right there. I'm not trying to evaluate, but it's really interesting that these accounts here in the early ministry here of the prophet Elijah show us that God's concerned for the faithful remnant. And these prophets are raised up. We'll see. We saw with Elijah, remember back in 1 Kings, we saw that how many faithful who had not bent their knee to Baal were still in Samaria? So Elijah, remember, he was called from Mount Horeb to go back. You're not done. What are you doing here? So there's more work to be done. These prophets were active to really encourage, in real tangible ways, I think, the faithful remnant. Anybody else? Yeah, sir.
Being back on that, notice he told them to close the door. Verse 4, I should close the door. You were saying that the faithful were there. Maybe there were those outside that were not faithful.
Oh.
That would be distractions from what was happening inside.
Yeah. That might be, yeah. All right. So this is the miracle. The miracles continue here in chapter 4 with the Shunammite woman who is struggling with conception and having a child here. And then later, the son who's born to the Shunammite woman is going to experience really a resurrection. This is a pretty dramatic place in the life of the prophet Elisha, being used by God in this very dramatic way. What kind of a shout do you think this may have been for the faithful believing community? Hearing about this would have been an encouragement, this kind of real tangible miracle taking place here in a very dark time still in the history of salvation, and here in and around the northern tribes of Israel. There's spiritual chaos all around, but the faithful remnant are still around, having church and doing it right. And God's concern for them shows up in the details of this history. He's going to be involved, Elisha, carrying the leprosy of the captain of the army of the king of Aram, or Aram. So it's interesting. We see glimpses of the daily ministry of the prophet spread out all over the place as he travels around. Let's keep going here. So we see, now we get involved in the political situation in Aram. And this is kind of a goofy picture. We'll explain it here in a little bit. We have reference here to Ben-Hadad, who's sick and sends his official Hazael to ask Elisha details of his recovery. Let's take a look at that in 2 Kings chapter 8. Let's move over there. There's a lot of things here that we could cover, but chapter 8, verses 7 and 8. Let's have, see, Ryan, are you here? Yeah, Ryan, this Ryan. Yeah, this Ryan, sorry. Chapter 8, verse 7 and 8.
Then Elisha came to Damascus. Now Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, was sick, and it was told him, saying, "The man of God has come here." The king said to Hazael, take a gift in your hand and go to meet the man of God and inquire of the Lord by him, saying, will I recover from this sickness? Say 7 and 8?
Yep. So go ahead and read verse 10 there, 9 and 10.
Okay. So Hazael went to meet him and took a gift in his hand, even every kind of good thing of Damascus, 40 camels' loads. And he came and stood before him and said, your son Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, has sent me to you, saying, will I recover from this sickness? Then Elisha said to him, go say to him, you will surely recover, but the Lord has shown me that he will certainly die. Yeah,
verse 10 is kind of tricky there in terms of interpretation. It just seems like it's a bit of sarcasm in a way of Elisha, on Elisha's part here. So the words of promised recovery are reserved for the king. However, Elisha's secret message to Hazael is that the king will die. But maybe as a result of feeling a little bit guilty, continues on in verses 11 and 12. And he fixed his gaze steadily on him until he was ashamed. And the man of God wept. And Hazael said, why does the Lord, my Lord, weep? Then he answered, because I know the evil that you will do to the sons of Israel. Their strongholds you will set on fire, and their young men you will kill with the sword, and their little ones you will dash in pieces, and their women with child you will rip up. Wow, hard to have a child Sunday school lesson on this text, isn't it? This gets pretty graphic and in your face with the details here. And then he predicts the kingship of Hazael in verse 13. Then Hazael said, but what is your servant, who is but a dog, that he should do this great thing? And Elisha answered, the Lord has shown me that you will be king over Aram. So, verse 15, it happens just as the prophet predicted. We see the murder here in the picture. And it came about on the morrow, that he took the cover and dipped it in water and spread it on his face so that he died. So the king is murdered by suffocation, and Hazael became king in his place. But let's take a look at some of the details here. There's some overlap in this description. Seems to have been the details of verse 12 there at the end. I want to spend a little time with that. Chapter 8, verse 12. This references to little ones being dashed and pregnant women being violently murdered, that kind of a thing. What's going on here? There's another prophet that stepped into this situation and spoke against this particular situation. It's interesting. If we turn over to, let's turn over to Amos. Amos is another prophet. We'll get to him in the fall, but he had some strong words of judgment against some of these nations, in this case Aram and the Arameans. And in the first part of the prophet Amos, we see a whole collection of the prophet Amos at work, bringing words of judgment against these nations, calling them out one by one. And chapter 1 in Amos, verse 3. And this is against Aram, in this reference to Damascus, the capital city. Thus says the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Damascus and for 4 I will not revoke its punishment, because they threshed Gilead with implements of sharp iron. So I'll send fire upon the house of Hazael, and it will consume the citadels of Ben-Hadad. So there's judgment going on there. And the connection is interesting because you've got another reference here in Amos with regards to implements of sharp iron. That's kind of odd. What's going on here? Is there a connection between the description in 2 Kings and what we read, kind of a shorthand version in the prophet Amos? So I've got a theory on this. When you've got the 3 transgressions of Damascus and for 4, that's just kind of laying it on itself with regards to sin upon sin. So the emphasis is on the brutality of the sin of Aram. So we know that comes out in Amos. If we look at 2 Kings, now we're back in 2 Kings. And in chapter 10, we have some of the details of this particular these invasions. The invasions of Syria and King Hazael against the Israelite kings Jehu and Jehoahaz, right in around 842 BC. 2 Kings chapter 10, verses 32 through 33. We have the first one. In those days, the Lord began to cut off portions from Israel, and Hazael defeated them throughout the territory of Israel, from the Jordan eastward and all the land of Gilead, the Gadites, Reubenites, Manassites, from Ar, which is by the valley of Arnon, even Gilead and Bashan. So that's the first one there. We have another one in 2 Kings chapter 13, verses 1 through 7. Let's see, Michael, are you here? Could you read that one? Chapter 13, 1 through 7.
In the 23rd year of Judah's King Joash, son of Ahaziah,
Ahaziah.
Jehoahaz, son of Jehu, became king over Israel and Samaria and reigned 17 years. He did what was evil in the Lord's sight and followed the sins that Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had caused Israel to commit. He did not turn away from them. So the Lord's anger burned against Israel, and he surrendered them to the power of Hazael, king of Aram, and his son Ben-Hadad during their reigns. Then Jehoahaz sought the Lord's favor, and the Lord heard him, for he saw the oppression the king of Aram inflicted on Israel. Therefore the Lord gave Israel a deliverer, and they escaped from the power of the Arameans. Then the people of Israel dwelt in their tents as before, but they didn't turn away from the sins that the house of Jeroboam had caused Israel to commit. Jehoahaz walked in them, and the Asherah pole also remained standing in Samaria. Jehoahaz did not have an army left, except for 50 horses, 10 chariots, and 10,000 foot soldiers, because the king of Aram had destroyed them, making them like dust at threshing.
Yeah, making them like dust at threshing. That's an interesting reference there in, 13 verse, verse 13, chapter 13, verse 7. So I'm putting this all together, and we have this ongoing conflict between Aram and Israel with regards to these kings. And Israel is losing these battles against what we call the kingdom of Aram Damascus. It's shown right there in terms of where they're located against Israel. So this is the skirmish that's going on. So I want to look at this a little bit and wonder what's going on here. You've got these details. We read the passage in 2 Kings 13:7. They left Jehoahaz no more than 50 horsemen, 10 chariots, and 10,000 footmen, for the king of Syria had destroyed them and made them like the dust at threshing. The dust at threshing. So we've got these clues. And what we have in terms of archaeology, and getting back to even the prophet Amos and his charge in chapter 1, verse 3 and 4, this idea of because they threshed Gilead with implements of sharp iron. What are we looking at here? Is this... Well, this is this idea of threshing. This is a device that was used for the purpose of really threshing. The wheat would be spread out over a flat surface, and a board. This board had sharp stones pounded into the bottom of it, and this board would be pulled over the top of the wheat. And the idea is that you'd separate it was a way of separating the wheat from the chaff. And then you'd throw it in the air and the wind would do the rest. So it was one of the steps involved in threshing wheat. But it's interesting how this same device is used in the terms of the violence, you might say, of a war crime. This ripping open, this dashing to pieces of children and the innocent, perhaps on the battlefield. Can you picture one of these guys doing this over the slain after the aftermath of a battle? So this is a graphic image of I would call it war crimes, kind of a war crime against humanity. And God's certainly concerned with this. And this is why judgment is brought so fiercely against these nations. You read Amos chapter 1, there's this whole collection of war crimes or violence against humanity that the Lord is charging against these nations around Israel at the time. So it's just an interesting theory. Whether it happened in reality or if it was just kind of used as kind of an illustration or some combination of both. It's hard to say. I don't know if they actually did this. We don't have any archaeological record. I'm just kind of bringing you in and making the connections so that you can see kind of more of a picture of what these authors are wrestling with in the text. So, all right. Of course, the foundation for all of this is what we've already seen. Genesis 1:26 to 27. How valuable is the human being to God, regardless of whether they're living in Israel or not? So war crimes are a crime against humanity, aka image of God bearers. So their value is in the fact that they are, even though they may be in a pagan nation and in somewhat rebellion or some stage of rebellion against God, they are still image of God bearers. This kind of crime or against humanity is dealt with in the text. So let's see, 2 Kings, well, let's see, we covered that. And again, I think I'd come back to the idea of the pagan mentality is that there's no value, again, on the value of the human being. Paganism has a way of reducing the value of the individual, the value of the image of God bearing in humanity. That's what paganism does. So pagans will do things like this. They have the propensity to do this kind of thing because they have a total disregard for the value of the image of God in man, even after the battle. So anyway, all right, we'll keep going here. So Elisha is not done. He and his group of prophets are going to find Jehu. Now, Jehu's going to be a somewhat ambiguous figure. Elisha is going to appoint him as king over Israel, but as a means of bringing judgment against the house of Ahab. We see the beginnings of that. Let's turn back to 2 Kings. 2 Kings chapter 9. 2 Kings chapter 9. There we go. And let's have, Austin up here. Could you read for us? Let's get into this in 2 Kings chapter 9, verses 1 through 3.
Then Elisha the prophet called one of the sons of the prophets and said to him, "Tie up your garments and take this flask of oil in your hand and go to Ramoth Gilead. And when you arrive, look there for Jehu, son of Jehoshaphat, son of Nimshi, and go in and have him rise from among his fellows and lead him to an inner chamber. Then take the flask of oil and pour it on his head and say, 'Thus says the Lord, I anoint you king over Israel.' Then open the door and flee. Do not linger."
Okay, so there's this finding of Jehu. Let's move over to verse 7 down through verse 10. Keep reading. Yeah.
"And you shall strike down the house of Ahab your master, so that I may avenge on Jezebel the blood of my servants the prophets, and the blood of all the servants of the Lord. For the whole house of Ahab shall perish, and I will cut off from Ahab every male, bond or free, in Israel. And I will make the house of Ahab like the house of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, and like the house of Baasha the son of Ahijah. And the dogs shall eat Jezebel in the territory of Jezreel, and none shall bury her." Then he opened the door and fled.
It's not the way you want to have your funeral in the ancient world. Yeah. So there's going to be some pretty severe judgment now coming against the house of Ahab, his wife Jezebel. And we're going to see that in the gory details of the text that's right around the corner. Just some archaeology. There's always things that kind of connect with the world outside of the Bible. And we've got reference to Jehu, son of Omri, in a what's called a black obelisk to the Assyrian king Shalmaneser III. So here we have these Assyrian kings who are interacting, in various ways with Israelite kings, and we have a reference here outside of the Bible to King Jehu. So there's things like that going on here. This is just a picture, and I think it's just, the text is part of this. So there's the reference there. Jehu's reign of terror begins with the assassination of Jehoram, or Joram, king of Israel, who's in the line of Omri. So we have Omri, if we remember him. From Omri, we go to Ahab. From Ahab to Ahaziah, and then to Joram. 2 Kings chapter 9. Let's take a look at verses 21 through 24. Let's have Tamara. Could you read for us?
What was that again?
Chapter 9, verses 21 through 24.
Then Joram said, "Get ready." And they made his chariot ready. Joram, king of Israel, and Ahaziah, king of Judah, went out, each in his chariot. And they went out to meet Jehu and found him in the property of Naboth the Jezreelite. When Joram saw Jehu, he said, "Is it peace, Jehu?" And he answered, "What peace? So long as the harlotries of your mother Jezebel and her witchcrafts are so many." So Joram reigned about and fled and said to Ahaziah, "There is a treachery, O Ahaziah." And Jehu drew his bow with his full strength and shot Joram between his arms, and the arrow went through his heart, and he sank into his chariot.
Okay, thanks for those details, right? So we've got judgment coming against the house of Ahab. Well, he's not done. Jehu's going to now assassinate the king of Judah, Ahaziah, in verses 27 through 28. Let's see, Grace up there, could you read for us in 27 through 28?
When Ahaziah, king of Judah, saw what had happened, he fled up the road to Beth-Hagan. Jehu chased him, shouting, "Kill him too." They wounded him in his chariot on the way up to Gur, near Ibleam, but he escaped to Megiddo and died there. His servants took him by the chariot to Jerusalem and buried him with his ancestors in his tomb in the city of David.
Okay, so one more assassination. Then Jehu goes after Jezebel. We always hiss when we say Jezebel, And she kind of knew it was coming by now. She expected it. She's verse 30. Where are we here? Jehu came to Jezreel. Jezebel heard of it, and she painted her. She put on her makeup. What's she doing here? She painted her eyes and adorned her head and looked out the window. And Jehu entered the gate. She said, "It is well, Zimri, your master's murderer." Then he lifted up his face to the window and said, "Who is on my side? Who?" And 2 or 3 officials looked down at him. And then we have the details, actually with no sparing of details, the assassination of Jezebel in verse 33 through 37. Let's have John up here. Could you read that for us?
27 through 33?
No, in chapter 9, 33 through 37.
He said, "Throw her down." So they threw her down, and some of her blood splattered on the wall and on the horses, and they trampled on her. Then he went in and ate and drank, and he said, "See now this cursed woman, and buried her, for she is a king's daughter." But when they went to bury her, they found no more of her than the skull and the feet and the palms of her hands. When they came back and told him, he said, "This is the word of the Lord, which he spoke by his servant Elijah to Tishbite. In the territory of Jezreel, the dogs shall eat the flesh of Jezebel, and the corpse of Jezebel shall be as dung on the face of the field in the territory of Jezreel, so that no one can say, 'This is Jezebel.'"
So it's kind of difficult to turn that into a nice, bright and cheery Sunday school lesson for your children's church. Although they do try to do that sometimes. We're working through we're not on this text per se, but we're working through a curriculum in our children's church that actually tries to cover all areas of the Old Testament, good, bad, and ugly. And it's a challenge sometimes when you come up through some of the more, we don't cover verse by verse, so there's a lot of kind of broadening of the message, God's judgment against. Without the details, I guess you have to do that with kids. But it's interesting, kids get it. I remember at the play, I was saying this earlier, the play over the weekend, we had these fifth graders in a packed theater and doing Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe. And at the climactic scene where the witch is just wicked, she just did this great job of being bad, She yelled and screamed and about blew out the sound system of the place. And she got booed by the kids. I mean, they get it. They understand evil and good. And they cheered when Aslan came back from the dead and at the great stone table. So I guess that's just a challenge. You want to, even your kids, they'll get a basic childlike understanding of the at this stage in history, there's a real sense of God's moving this agenda ahead. And in this case, we have a real entrenched, with Ahab and Jezebel, this real entrenched commitment to extreme paganism. And we already know how the Lord feels about this as he moves the agenda ahead. So Jehu's kind of an interesting character when we move ahead. And in terms of how he's evaluated, he's not done yet, of course. Jehu, we move over to chapter 10. Let's read verses 6 through 7. Marla, could you read that? Chapter 10, verses 6 through 7.
6 through 7. Then he wrote a letter to them a second time, saying, if you are on my side and you will listen to my voice, take the heads of the men, your master's son, and come to me at
Jezreel
tomorrow, about this time. Now the king's son, 70 persons were with the great men of the city, who were hearing them. When the letter came to them, they took the king's sons and daughters to them, 70 persons, and took their heads in baskets and sent them to him at Jezreel.
Yeah, so this is a way that you end the dynasty. All the king's sons and Ahab and Jezebel, they had 70 sons at this time, so all of them were taken out. So this is just taking out the whole dynasty. And just to make sure the job was good and done, go down to verse 17. And when he came to Samaria, he killed all who remained to Ahab in Samaria until he had destroyed him, according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke to Elijah. All right. But we think that that's it, but he's not done yet. There's still more judgment. Now we get into the Lord is taking care of in a way, the political side of things. Now there's more judgment to be brought against in terms of the spiritual side of things, you might say. Let's have Charles. Yeah, over here. Could you read starting in verse 18 in chapter 10 down through verse 21?
18 to 21.
Mm-hmm.
Then Jehu assembled all the people and said to them, Ahab served Baal and little. Jehu will serve him much. Now therefore call to me all the prophets of Baal, all these worshippers and all his priests. Let none be missing, for I have a great sacrifice to offer a Baal. Whoever is missing shall not live. But Jehu did it with cunning in order to destroy the worshippers of Baal. And Jehu ordered, sanctify a solemn assembly for Baal. So they proclaimed it. And Jehu sent throughout all Israel, and all the worshippers of Baal came. so that there was not a man left who did not come. And they entered the house of Baal, and the house of Baal was filled from one end to the other.
All right, so he's gathering all these prophets of Baal. Kind of reminds us of Elijah taking on the house of the prophets of Baal at Mount Carmel. And then you have the aftermath in 25. In verse 25, it came about as soon as he had finished offering the burnt offering that Jehu sent or said to the guard and to the royal officials, "Go in, kill them, let none come out." And they killed them with the edge of the sword, and the guard and the royal officers threw them out and went to the inner room of the house of Baal. And they brought out the sacred pillars of the house of Baal and burned them. And they also broke down the sacred pillars of Baal and broke down the house of Baal and made it a latrine to this day. This is and people would have responded like, yes, they got what was coming, this extreme form of course. Now we've got the evaluation of Jehu. Jehu eradicated Baal out of Israel. However, we've got one of those big buts of the Bible in verse 29. What about Jehu? Did he get a positive evaluation? However, as for the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nevat, which he made Israel sin, and from these Jehu did not depart. Even the golden calves which were at Bethel and Dan. The Lord said to Jehu, because you've done well in executing what is right in my eyes, and have done to the house of Ahab according to all that was in my heart, your sons of the fourth generation shall sit on the throne of Israel. But Jehu was not careful to walk in the law of the Lord, the God of Israel, with all of his heart. And he did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam, which he made Israel sin. So, still not a positive evaluation. With regards to the spiritual reform, some of it was accomplished, but not the full picture. So, somewhat of an ambiguous king, really. Hard to really, kind of like Samson, trying to evaluate him. He had some bright points in terms of being faithful to the Lord, carrying out his job description for the day, but somewhat difficult to get around. It just shows you almost like a continuation, I think, of the book of Judges. We have now a king in place, but we've still got this spiritual chaos around and this unconquered, well-entrenched paganism that we're seeing rear its ugly head at every turn. So we're still waiting for a reforming king to come along. And meanwhile, back at the ranch, we have some good kings working in the southern nation of Judah. Let's leave the north for a while, Israel, and we read about them. Let's go over to chapter 14, verses 1 through 4. And see, Jared Jackson, are you here? There you are. Could you read for us in chapter 14, verses 1 through 4? Bless you.
In the year of Joash, the son of Joahaz, king of Israel, Amaziah, the son of Joash, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jehoiakim of Jerusalem. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, yet not like David his father. He did in all the things that Joash his father had done. But the high places were not removed. The people still sacrificed and made offerings on the high places.
Yeah, even he gets a positive evaluation. That's one of the positive kings, but still not fully. There's still those pesky high places that are oftentimes left unaddressed. If we move down to chapter 15, we see a similar description of another positive king. Keep reading there, chapter 15, verses 1 through 4. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In the 27th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, Azariah, the son of Amaziah, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 16 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 52 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jechaliah of Jerusalem, and he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, according to all that his father Amaziah had done. Nevertheless, the high places were not taken away. The people still sacrificed and made offerings on the high places.
Okay. Now, one of the things that we have to recognize that's going on behind the scenes during this, in parallel to this whole period in history, the prophetic machine, you might say, is starting to rev up. So God is calling prophets, and He's going to call prophet after prophet we call these the writing prophets, major and minor prophets. And we'll get to those in the fall course. And we start to see these prophets raised up. Let's take a look at Isaiah, just a couple places. When God cannot work through kings, he's going to raise up these prophets. And they're not going to be necessarily coming from the elite class. For example, in the case of Amos, he's going to be a shepherd from Tekoa, a grower of figs and a herdsman, you know. But yeah, I think they're coming out of these, I've made the case before, that these small town country churches, they're growing up with some exposure to God's word, a praying community, a worshiping community. These faithful remnant groups are still around, and we don't have all the details in the text, but I think they're producing the Amoses of the Old Testament, coming from these places. Isaiah got his start here. Let's see, Isaiah chapter 1. Let's read this. Let's see, have Jenny, could you read for us in chapter 1 in Isaiah, verses 1? And, yeah, keep it.
The vision of Isaiah, the son of Amos, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, king of Judah.
So he's right on top, Isaiah, for example, right in the midst of this whole period of chaos that we've been revealing. All of these world events that are happening. And, of course, Isaiah is pretty expansive with regard to this prophetic ministry, but this is where he gets his start. So God raises up these prophets. I'm going to show you another slide here too, but you see the judgment that starts to come. Listen, O heavens, verse 2. Fear, O earth, for the Lord speaks. Sons I have reared and brought up, but they've revolted against me. An ox knows its owner, and a donkey its master's manger. But Israel does not know. My people do not understand. Alas, sinful nation, people weighed down with iniquity, offspring of evildoers, sons who act corruptly. They have abandoned the Lord. They have despised the Holy One of Israel. They have turned away from him. Where will you be stricken again? As you continue in your rebellion, the whole head is sick and the whole heart is faint, from the sole of the foot even to the head. There's nothing sound in it, only bruises, welts, and raw wounds, not pressed out or bandaged, not softened with oil. Your land is desolate. Your cities are burned with fire. Your fields, strangers are devouring them in your presence. Its destruction is overthrown by strangers. You get the sense this is preaching, right? Yeah. So these prophets are being raised up by God, and this is a picture, this is the way I organize the prophets, just for the purpose of keeping track of the pre-exilic prophets, the exilic prophets, and what we call the post-exilic prophets. And we'll study these more in the fall, but you've got Amos, Hosea, Jonah, and Isaiah. Really, those prophets are raised up for getting the attention of Israel, the northern nation. And then look at the exponential growth. So after 722, that's a significant date. That's the fall of Samaria, the capital city of Israel, when the Assyrians come down and exile out the entire capital city of Samaria. Then we have a period of time where Judah is still intact as a nation. Capital city, Jerusalem. They're watching these world events take place. What's going on in the north? Hey, our brothers and sisters to the north, they're gone. What's going to happen to us now? Well, guess what? God raises up a lot of prophets to start to get the attention of Judah in the south. And we've got Micah, Zephaniah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Nahum, Habakkuk, Ezekiel. Of course, he goes with the exiles. He's their preacher in Babylon. And then we've got Daniel, who's also part of the early deportation. He's going to be working behind the scenes. I call him the special ops prophet. And then Obadiah. And after that, 586, you know that Jerusalem falls. And then we have this 70-year period of exile, and we have to wait that long before God raises up and works politically through the Persian king Cyrus. Now, we've talked about the Cyrus decree. that ends the Cyrus decree actually is the last thing that we see in the Hebrew canon, and it's the first part of the book of Ezra, but it announces the return in 538, and then you've got these post-exilic. I put Joel in that area too. Joel's hard to exactly place, but Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, and then you have the post-history, the post-exilic history of the chronicler. The Chronicles was written for that post-exilic audience. And unfortunately, some of you got confused because you thought you were taking a quiz on Chronicles when it was really on Psalms. So I apologize for that, but I'm breaking up the history a little bit. I want to bring in the wisdom text, Psalms, because it's closer to this, again, it's closer to this period of history that we've been covering. During the monarchy, United Kingdom, divided kingdom, is when Psalms and Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, Song of Psalms, and I think Job are all having their formation and from kings like David and Solomon and some of these guys. So that's why I'm doing it this way. So this just shows you God's concern through the prophetic word, and these prophets are going to bring primarily two types of messages through their preaching ministry, words of judgment to a group that needs to be told, you're sinning, you're in rebellion, you need to change, there's time to repent. And then to this group over here, you're sitting in the right part of the room today, the faithful remnant we've been talking about, the prophets are going to be called up to them to encourage this group. They need to be encouraged because they've been faithful behind the scenes. Every now and then we see glimpses of them showing up in the text. They're active and faithful, but God has prophets to encourage you all with this message, the day of the Lord. There's still a day that's coming, and the Lord's agenda will, and all of the fulfillment of all that God has promised, and we'll see when we get into the fall, we'll see the Davidic covenant and all of these things that are still coming, the day of the Lord and everything that comes. God's going to come and establish his rule, his kingdom, and the blessing will be extended to the nations, and all of that bookend idea is part of the message of the day of the Lord that is reserved for the faithful remnant. So it's all interesting, and it's very complicated. We see a book like 2 Kings that's so seemingly focused on the negative, which it is, but we have to understand that there was a group of hard-hearted exiles in Babylon that needed to be, transformed. They were in rebellion. They have come out of this syncretistic religious world, and God had, in order to get their attention, he's taken them to exile and stripped them of their access to their high places and all of those things. Now that he has them in a holy huddle, prophets like Ezekiel are coming on the scene to get their attention. And we know that it happens, it works. 22,000 or more come back out of exile, make the long journey back into Jerusalem and rebuild the walls and the temple under Ezra and Nehemiah, and that whole post-exilic period that we see after the Cyrus decree in 538. So, okay, let's... where'd Patrick go? Let's just keep going a few more minutes. I need him to... we'll take our first break here in just a couple minutes. All right, let's keep going here. So the dams are beginning to show in 2 Kings chapter 15. We start to see for Israel in the north. Chapter 15, verses 17 through 21. Let's see. Jonathan here in the front, could you read for us? Chapter 15, verses 17 through 21.
39th year of Ezra, king of Judah, Menahem, the son of Gadda, began to reign over Israel. He reigned 10 years in Samaria. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. He did not depart in all his days from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which he made Israel. All the king of Assyria came against the land, and Menahem gave all 1,000 talents of silver, that he might help them to firm his hold on the royal power.
Okay, we can pause there. This is a Pul, Tiglath-Pileser III. This is the Assyrian king, And this is this Assyrian king who comes on the scene and begins to solidify the Assyrian strength. Assyria is going to be the first bully on the block. I call them the three bullies: Assyria, the Babylonians, and then we have the Persians. Those are the three big bullies from the north who are going to come down at various times and bring about exile, first to Israel, then to Judah. And then Persia allows the group to come back. So we have references to Tiglath-Pileser through his temple reliefs, which were the headlines of the day, the place where the public could go and read the inscriptions or hear the inscriptions being read, learn about the campaigns and the successful invasion of Israel, which is really well documented, actually, outside of the biblical text. It's going to mention this tribute that we have, actually, on a non-biblical source, on a temple relief. Menahem of Samaria, his tribute to King Tiglath-Pileser, is mentioned in the relief, temple relief in Assyria. We also read of some details about his campaign against Israel's king Pekah, also which connects to 2 Kings chapter 15, verses 27 through 29. Let's have Ryan, could you read for us? Wow, yeah.
16, 27 through
2 Kings 15, 27 through 20.
All right.
No, 15.
Yeah, 15. In the 52nd year of Azariah, king of Judah, Pekah, son of Ramaliah, became king over Israel and Samaria and reigned 20 years. He did evil in the sight of the Lord. He did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he made Israel sin. In the days of Pekah, king of Israel, Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, came and captured
Ejon,
and Abel-Beth
Makkah,
and
Jamoah,
thank you,
Kadesh, Hatzor, Gilead, and Galilee.
all the land of Naphtali, and he carried them captive to Assyria. And Hoshea, the son of Eliah,
No, that's good. You can just stop there. All right. So these are the details that we have. Some of them coming through in the biblical text of the first Assyrian king, Tiglath-Pileser, coming down and starting to slowly dismantle Israel, region by region. During the same time, in the south, we have Ahaz, who becomes king in Israel in 2 Kings chapter 16, verses 1 through 4. Let's see, Mark Lindgren, over here. Could you read for us? Chapter 16, verses 1 through 4.
In the 17th year of Pekah, the son of Ramaliah, Ahaz, the son of Jotham, king of Judah, began to reign. Ahaz was 20 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem. He did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord his God, as his father David had done. He walked in the way of the kings of Israel. He even burned his son as an offering, according to the despicable practices of the nations whom the Lord drove out before the people of Israel. And he sacrificed and made offerings on the high places, and on the hills, and under every green tree.
Whew, okay. We all kind of gasped when you read that, and that would have been the same kind of gasp that would have come from the audience in exile. Wow, we don't want to go back and do that again, do we? You know, we've come a long way. We don't want to go back and recreate that scenario. So Pekah is going to join with the king of Aram. Aram's coming back now again in history against Ahaz. Ahaz goes for help and with lots of money in 2 Kings chapter 16, verses 7 through 9 is going to seek help. And keep reading there in verse 7 through 9.
So Ahaz sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, saying, I'm your servant and your son. Come up and rescue me from the hand of the king of Syria and from the hand of the king of Israel who are attacking me. Ahaz also took the silver and gold that was found in the house of the Lord and in the treasures of the king's house and sent a present to the king of Assyria. And the king of Assyria listened to him.
the king of Assyria marched up against Damascus and took it, carrying its people captive to Kir, and he killed the rest of them.
You see some interesting language there in verse 7, where you have the words from Ahaz, I am your servant and your son. You know, that familial language we've talked about before, where kings would write to each other, and I'm your father, you are my son. So there's just covenant language that's going on there. And of course, this is not a good thing for any king in Israel or Judah to be getting into an alliance with a pagan king here. So there's more chaos ahead. Let's do this. Let's take our break now, and we'll come back at about, quarter after, and we'll keep going. All right?